I think I would agree with your representation that the US is a little bit of a free-for-all right now in terms of stablecoin issuance. I think currently the way the Act in Canada is structured is, you're going to have a pretty high bar for people that want to become issuers, including having to come in and register as an issuer of the Bank of Canada. And you're also going to have a framework that's going to be ensuring that the entities are properly governed and they have the right oversight to be an issuer. So users can feel fully confident that they're protected when they're using the token, and it's a valid token. So I would say we're hoping that Canada kind of takes the great of all systems that are currently available or frameworks that are available internationally, and that we make it our own. And I would commend the speed at which the Minister of Finance has moved on this. 3, 4, 5 months ago, we were kind of nowhere. We now have something that bridges us closer to the rest of the G7 and G20 markets. There's still a lot of work left to do, but I think, we've been very happy with the speed at which government's moving on this file.
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of had to move. I think there was a little bit less choice in that just because, Canada is not the leader of all global markets. But I guess my question would be, because you have a lot of these conversations and you're also a bit international as well, if you could wave the magic wand as to what we need today, what would be your wish list?
I think the biggest one for the industry generally would be to make the CSA framework go away. So the Canadian Securities Association has had a framework that's based on securities law for stablecoin. They've now issued a prospectus to a company, and I think that's a mistake. That's a mistake for various ways, but it essentially nullifies a lot of the use cases for a stablecoin. Mostly who can touch it, what they can do with it. So a lot of the large value that's derived from stablecoins, meaning their settlement instruments, their payment instruments, they're basically utility for movement of capital in various ways, becomes invalid through that framework. And, if I were to use my magic wand, one of the issue there is the constitutional issue where the federal government can't really tell provinces what to do, right? So, maybe I would make that go away for a day until this legislation is in place, and then kind of move forward. There's also a huge aspect in the current framing where, there's drafting around the yield aspect of a stable coin. And, that goes back to the competitiveness of Canada versus, global markets. Now, you don't necessarily want people to treat a stable coin like an investment because that becomes then a security or another type of product. But you have to be able to incentivize people to hold your token if you want to be competitive globally. So as an example, Canada pushes or punches above its weight as a reserve currency, specifically the Canadian dollar, while people that are holding that in their reserves are able to invest that Canadian dollar and get a yield on it. Now, if you adhere to a vision that over time maybe those reserves get transferred to stable coins because of usability and fungibility and liquidity mechanism, then you need to be able to generate a return on your stable coin if you're going to use it as a reserve asset. So that's another piece of the current framework that I think needs to be explored a little bit further and potentially drafted a little bit sharper. And the final piece, which I think is potentially a large gap, is financial institutions generally are completely excluded from the Act. So that means banks can issue tokens and call them security deposit tokens or something else, and they don't have to abide to any kind of framework by the Bank of Canada. And while, technically the banks have governance frameworks and rights as financial institutions, if you're going to call something a stable coin, I think everybody should be held to the same standard, specifically around the usability and the governance around it. So those would be the three areas that I would use my to clarify.
Do you think the yield situation will clear up once the banks are making money on it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Potentially, and I do think Clarity Act in the U.S. might open some construct and framework. For those that follow what's happening in the U.S., you've had Genius that touches stablecoin, but Clarity's touching everything else crypto related. And there's a lot of back and forth on Clarity Act currently because traditional financial institutions are fighting back through lobbying and through various levels of government. I think ultimately, like, financial institutions will understand that this technology is incredibly beneficial to them and their retail users, and they'll find a way to enable it.